Okay. There. Okay. Well, welcome everyone to our call. It's funny to formally introduce, start as we've all been chatting for the last few minutes, but since we are recording this, whoops, sorry, I did not mean to advance the slides. Anything I touch in the computer screen advances the slides. Thanks everyone for joining us. Another OPH training call with our wonderful trainer, Cinder. And today's topic, loose leash walking. So we're going to walk through some content, and then of course we can take questions. And this is a topic near and dear to my heart because I have been lazy and have never taught my dog loose leash walking. I know I should. She drags me all over the neighborhood and it's my fault and I know it. So I'm going to use this as an inspiration to maybe train her to loose leash. I've only had her for 5 years.
It's never too late.
Yes, right. Okay. Over to you, Cinder. Just tell me when you want me to advance.
Sure. My little house guest has something to say. Oh, both of them do. Okay, boys, do you want to see? It's a Zoom call. You want to see? Okay. Say hi, Oscar. So I have a lot of content here. Anybody who was on the last loose leash walking call, I know we didn't get around to answering a lot of questions, and there's just so much that we can talk about. That, feel free to stop me and ask questions, or ask questions later. You can always email me and ask questions as well. I will try to get through all this. If we have to split it up into two, that's fine as well. So let's get started. And so first slide, please. Hi, Oscar. Are you going to watch? Okay, so let's talk about loose leash walking. It is a team sport. Both of the players have to be involved. If the dog is ignoring you, obviously they're running, they're pulling, they're doing whatever else. If you're ignoring the dog, they aren't getting any feedback from you. So if you're on your phone or if you're doing whatever, talking to somebody else and not paying attention to the dog and not reinforcing them when they do pay attention to you, you need to pay attention to your partner. So both of you have to take a little responsibility, and it's really important that everybody has their head in the game, as it were. So it's also really important to set everybody up for success before you go outside. When you get outside and you realize you don't have a poop bag, or you've been dragged down to the sidewalk and your door is standing wide open, that's never great. So we want to start setting everybody up for success before we go outside. Next slide. So equipment, have all of your equipment ready. And this looks like a lot of stuff. It's not really that much stuff. You're going to want your treat pouch. I like this one. It's my favorite because it will stay closed. It has a magnet. Yes, is that a treat pouch, Oscar? It has a magnet that keeps it closed, but it's easy to get into. And it has space for poop bags, and it has an outside pocket for my phone. So any kind of treat bag that you want to use is fine. But some people just use like a nail apron from the hardware store, and that works fine too. And you can throw it in the wash, which is nice. You're going to want high value treats. And what that means is high value to your learner. So just because you think it sounds like it's great, if the dog isn't excited about it, it's not going to help much. So you want to you can try out your smorgasbord when you're inside. Try out some shredded chicken breasts, some string cheese broken into tiny, tiny bites. Like for Oscar, I would use this little crumb, and he's very happy to get that. So tiny little bits. There are things that you can make. You can make tuna fudge. You can microwave a handful of Cheerios with a slice of hot dog, and then it all smells like hot dog, and they like that a lot. And it's not so fattening. Lots of dogs like peanut butter, which you can now get in a squeeze tube, which is super helpful when you're out walking. You just give a squeeze and move on. Some dogs like the little Zooks treats. It just depends on your dog. So do give it a little bit of time and see what you can do to see what they like. You're going to want a body harness, or if you walk your dog on a collar, you're going to want your collar. You're going to want a leash. I prefer like a 4 foot to 6 foot leash, and I actually prefer flat leashes, but this is Timothy's leash. Timothy's over here. That came with him to me. So I'm using that leash. I don't like to hang the poop bags on there because it makes it awkward. And also, if you happen to drop the leash, it's going to be chasing your dog if they're running, and it will make them continue to run. Same can be the problem with the plastic handle leashes or with the extendable leashes. I'm not a fan of retractable leashes. For working on recalls, they're useful, but for walking, I really don't recommend them. They put constant pressure on the neck, so you're kind of teaching your dog to pull. And if they get wrapped around your legs, they can do some really nasty cuts. And if your dog runs, it'll chase them and they'll be terrified and keep running. So next, once you've got all of your equipment together, we will go to our setup, which is the next slide. So with a dog who's new to you, or a dog who could use some work on their leash walking skills, who's maybe not new to you, which is fine, it's really important to set out time for each dog individually. So right now I have here at my house, I have Timothy and Oscar. And if I was going to work on one of them on their leash walking skills, I would not take them both out together, because then I just have dachshunds wrapped around my legs. So working with one dog at a time is the best thing for the dog and the easiest thing for you. And there, you will be able to, at some point, take them out together, but we really want to make sure that everybody's kind of got some skills and knows how to pay attention to you when they're on leash, and is not going to tie you in a knot or drag you down the street before we start mixing dogs together at the same time. And we really don't want to accidentally practice any behavior that you don't want, because when I've worked with a lot of clients who you go in and the dog is just absolutely crazy when they're trying to put on the collar or the harness or the leash. They're running around in circles, they're jumping up and down, they're grabbing the harness, they're grabbing the leash. And that's usually kind of a trained behavior, because with puppies and with dogs that we're house training, we kind of rush to get them out the door and don't focus on behavior, on having some good behavior. So we really want to make sure that we do a lot of setup in the house before we expect to do great leash walking outside. You might want to use different equipment when you're taking them out just to go potty. So like, say for Oscar, I might put him on, he has a little martingale slip leash. I might put him on that to go outside just to go potty. We'll go to the spot where I want him to go potty. I'll stand there with him until he does. Hi. And then we will come back in the house. We won't go for a walk. So if we're going for an actual walk, I would take out a harness, put his harness on, get all of our equipment together, get our treats with us so that we can go for a walk and practice our good walking behavior while we're there. So we're all prepped for when we get outside. And that's, they catch on really quickly to the different equipment. So they're like, oh, we're just going outside to go potty, no big deal. And then they're like, oh, we're going for a walk. Well, that's really great. So that can be extremely helpful in giving them a cue that they're going out to the bathroom, which they may do that more quickly for you then as well, or that they're going out for a walk. You're a good boy. So next slide. Oh, good job, Oscar. Okay. Oh, can we get the next slide, Irene?
Yeah, no, sorry, I'm trying it. It doesn't want to advance.
It's not doing it.
I was trying to unmute and try to, there we go. Sorry.
Too many things at once. So here we are with reinforcing calm behavior for harnessing and leashing. And this is something that you can train separately from actually going for a walk. You want to practice doing either whatever you want your dog to do to get their harness on. You may want them to sit. If they're extremely short, like these two, you may want them to stand so that you can reach and get their little legs in. It's your choice what behavior you want, but you should practice that with them before you go for a walk. And you might want to practice a few times a day, just for a minute, and then take it back off, put it away, and don't go. Because if every time they see that harness, it predicts that they're going for a walk, they're just going to go crazy every time they see it. And we really want to prevent that and teach them that there are good manners that you can use to get the opportunity to get dressed and go for a walk. So we'll practice moving the leash toward the dog. Just, here, moving the leash toward the dog and clipping their collar. Oscar's a really good boy. They do this a lot. So practice, and if your dog starts getting jumpy and crazy, take your leash back and go away. Say, oh, sorry, not happening right now. If they stay calm and they let you attach their leash, you can give a treat. And if you have a dog who's just so bouncy and so crazy that you can't even begin to start, take your treat, put it right on their nose like a little magnet. So I would take this little piece of cheese. Yes, I would, Oscar. And I would just hold this on his nose and let him nibble at it while I click his collar. And then stop, and the cheese goes away. Cheese comes back, put the leash on. Yeah, cheese goes away. You dropped a piece. There you go. So it's okay to get the dog to hold still for a moment with a treat right on the nose. And if you use something like string cheese, peanut butter, something that they have to lick for a second, rather than just something they can eat right away, it's going to have them hold still for longer. Calm behavior for harnessing and leashing. And getting out the door is going to be our next slide. So we want them to believe that calm behavior at the door is what makes the door open. They are not, if they're acting crazy and they're jumping on the door and they're pawing at the door, we're just going to close the door. If they sit and wait for a moment, then crack the door open. If they leap up, close the door. This is a game that they find kind of annoying. I typically have them station themselves about 2 feet back from the door, and I might again use a treat magnet to do that at the beginning, just so that you can get them there and set them up to do some repetitions successfully. If they keep jumping up, we just keep closing the door. And once that they're like, fine, I'll just sit here then you open the door, you go outside, you have a little party. You can go for a walk or you can play for a minute, and then you can come in and do it all over again. And the reinforcement for that is getting out the door. Calm behavior at the door makes the door open. Crazy behavior at the door makes the door close and not let you outside. All right, next slide. Closing the door. This is something that we don't think about when we go out the door. So we want the dog to orient to us when we're going out the door so that we can get the door open and get out without them dragging us down the porch or out to the street. But it's really important, once you get the door open, you may want to say your dog's name right away so that they turn on the porch to look at you and then give a treat. Say their name, give a treat, because you want to be able to close the door. It's kind of important for most of us to shut the door and possibly lock it. And you don't want them dragging you down the stairs while you're trying to shut the door. So we want to work on reorienting to you by saying their name or asking them to wait or whatever cue you want to give them, closing the door, and then you can tell them, okay, let's go, or we're all done, let's go, or take a walk, or whatever you want to do, and let them know, and then you can go for your walk. All right, next slide. leash handling. Let's talk about some leash handling for a minute. The way that I like people to hold their leashes, a lot of people will put their wrist through, which is kind of dangerous. You can break your wrist that way. I recommend that you do a leash lock, thumb lock. So you're going to put your thumb through the loop. And I do obedience with my dogs, so I generally keep them on the left side. So I hold my leash with my right hand, put my thumb through the loop, close my hand, and then I take up the excess with my fingers, my first two fingers, and kind of accordion fold or, loop it like you would a hose. And your goal is to have a J between you and the dog. So when we're walking, I'm going to have my leash lock. I'm going to put my hand right at my belly button or my belt buckle right there in the middle of my body, because that really, putting your hand at your center of gravity, if the dog is going to pull hard, you're going to have a lot better chance of holding on and not getting dragged off your feet. And it will keep you from yanking and, being tempted to have constant pressure on the leash. Your other hand is going to be, your treat pouch will be on that hip. And we're going to just treat straight out of that treat pouch right down to the dog. Now, with these little guys, and a lot of you may have little bitty guys too, it might be easier to have like a wooden spoon and put some peanut butter on there. And then you have an arm extension so you're not constantly bending over to treat the dog. So for starters, we'll do like a step treat or a doodle steps kind of game, where you'll start with the dog at your side. You'll take a step, treat. You'll take another step, then treat. Take another step, then treat. If the dog may be running all over the place, bouncing around, acting crazy, ignore that. We're going to treat every step. And you may have to call them back to you because you want to treat in that position where you want them next to you. And once they figure out what the game is, they'll be like, oh, I'm right here, I'm right here, I'm right here. And then you can start treating them for looking at you. You can start mixing it up a little bit so that they don't get a treat with every step. Dogs are really big gamblers, so they love that keep them guessing kind of thing. They're like, oh, is it going to be 3 steps? Is it going to be 2 steps? Is it going to be 5 steps? And they will keep coming back for more as long as you keep treating, and as long as you're keeping up a high enough rate of reinforcement. So they love to play these games. And then we will progress a little bit to the next slide. Which is the magic box game. So you're going to start this game standing still. You're going to click or mark, say yes. I have my clicker here that I use. And it's just basically cool treat. You get an extra treats just for being a cute boy. And so you're going to click or you're going to mark with a yes or a good or whatever marker that you might want to use whenever your dog is close to your body. So you're just going to be standing here. Like if I were standing here with Oscar, I might just stand here and click him for being close to me. You gonna hop down, Oscar? So he's out at the end of his leash right now. Oh, let's see, he's coming up next to me. Good. There you go. I know, picky, huh? There you go. And anytime that they make the leash loose, loose leash and leash loose are hard to say. Anytime that the dog causes the leash to be loose, you're going to click or mark and treat. You're just going to be standing there. And you want to think about where your magic box is. Where do you want your dog to be? Do you want them on your left? Do you want them on your right? Do you want them in front of you? Would you prefer that they walk behind you? Any of those are fine. You just need to decide what you really want to be doing. And you can set the boundary and they can be anywhere within that boundary. That's fine too. So the goal is that they stay within the proximity that you want them to be, and you pay for that, and then they don't pull the leash They don't pull on the leash because they know that they're going to get treated before they get to the end of the leash. And doing all these games where you treat intermittently is really exciting to the dog. It's very engaging, and they will want to play this game with you. They'll want to learn. They'll be very curious about what's happening next. What are we doing now? And the next slide. And we can work on following a target. So the way that if your dog doesn't already have a target cue, like a touch cue, you're just going to hold your fingers out. Hey, Oscar. I'm going to treat him for that. Yeah, I am. My treat delivery is not super fast. Touch. Good. I think he knows this one. I'm sure his owner has taught him that. Touch. Okay. Now, if I wanted to move him around, I could have him follow the target, and we'll take a couple steps. You're going to take a step. Touch. Oh, is the couch too squishy? Oscar, touch. There you go. What are you doing? There you go. So we'll get the dog to where they understand the targeting game, and then they can follow your hand. You can tell them to touch and move your hand down and up, put it out here and say touch, touch, touch. It's a really great way to work with having them follow the target, but also teaching them to back up, which is a little bit harder, and teaching them to move around you without you moving. So if you're standing, if you're carrying boxes in from outside and you can't see anything, you can tell them, go over here, go over there. You can teach them all the directions and keep them out from underfoot, which is a little more advanced training, but not terribly difficult. And you can teach them to target an object as well. So again, you can use a wooden spoon or a stick, or they do make specific target sticks for training that a lot of us use. They're, retractable, which is kind of nice, but these work fine and they're much cheaper. So feel free to use a wooden spoon or, a magic wand that you get at the dollar store. All of those things are kind of fun. And our next game is on the next slide. So this is like a loose leash return. This is a really helpful game for boys. What are you doing? This is a really helpful game for recalls as well as for loose leash walking. So what we're going to do is we're going to let the dog get a couple of feet ahead of you. You're going to, until, we're not going to wait until they're out at the end of the leash pulling hard. We're going to let them get a couple of feet ahead. When there's no leash pressure, you're going to either click, you're going to say the dog's name or yes, or mark, whatever marker word you want to use. And then you're going to treat them next to your leg. So they're going to come back and get their treat. You're going to click or, mark when the leash is loose and they're out in front of you, but you're going to treat in position next to you. So they will learn that they go however many feet, then they come back and stay by your side without getting to the end of the leash. And that also really helps with recalls if you use their name particularly. Okay, Tim. Oh, Timothy wants to come up too. So that can be a super useful exercise for everybody, for any dog, to get them to come and to get them to walk on a loose leash. And our next game is a little bit more advanced. So when your dogs are getting pretty comfortable with staying in the box, staying close to you, we're going to, again, let them go out a couple feet ahead of you. We're going to cue them so that they know that we're turning, and we'll say, let's go, or turn, or whatever you want to say. And we're going to quickly go in another direction. And when they catch up to you where you want them to be, you're going to give them the treat. And they kind of find this fun. A lot of dogs do. And then the next game is just kind of a riff on the crazy walking game. And that's next slide, I guess. And that would be the catch me game. So it's sort of an amped up version of crazy walking. And it also helps with recalls quite a lot. you're gonna run in the other direction. You're gonna cue the dog with catch me and take off. And when they catch you, you're gonna give them a treat, you're gonna play, you're gonna immediately turn and go in another direction and have them catch you again. And that's super helpful with recalls because they will learn to respond to their name by coming to you even when they're excited and bouncing around. And they will stay within leash distance of you without taking off. All right, so those were the games that I was going to go over. I wanted to talk with everybody about options for the next tips and tricks course, which would be things like we could do reactivity on walks, working with reactivity on walks or in your home. We could do teaching super fast recalls. We could also do long line sniffy walks and why they're important, or other suggestions that people have, things that people need to work on. And I guess this wasn't as much as I thought it was going to be. So we can take questions for as many questions as people would like to ask. And feel free to ask questions that don't necessarily have to do with loose leash walking. Any of the behavior things that you need.
Hi, Cinder. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. We have a pup who we adopted through OPH, and we've had her for quite some time, and we've really struggled with not getting her to pull, but she also runs. She's not as bad as she used to, but she just goes. And when she goes, she does not come back. And a lot of times it's almost like she's a little bit scared and confused. And so you made reference to these crazy walks being that sort of to a recall. Does that also work with scared or, you know, I don't want to call her damaged, but she definitely has some fear going on.
We've all got some baggage. It's okay. Yeah, it can be a really fun game for them. For dogs that are more fearful, you might want to just practice like sitting in a small space with her, saying her name, saying come, and giving a treat. And like in proximity, like where she doesn't have to actually come, because what you're doing then is you're just conditioning those words that when you say her name and come, then she will get a treat no matter what. And then you can start working from longer distances. That can be a really useful thing with fearful dogs.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Holding the leash. Okay, let's see. So the way that I hold my leash is I'm going to take the loop, I'm going to put it over my thumb. I'm going to close my hand around the loop, so that if they pull, it's locked, but it's not going to injure me. I'm going to take these two fingers, typically for me. I mean, you can use whichever fingers you're comfortable with, but this way, when I have the loops like this, I've still got a hold of the leash, and I can let go of these as much as I want to. So, yes, Oscar? I can wrap this, and you don't want to wrap it around your hand because it's really easy for you to get hurt, and it's really hard for you to loosen up and kind of have a silky, smooth leash. So, because you want to also be practicing keeping a loose leash. I mean, it's partially your responsibility. So here, go get your sleepy baby. So holding it that way can make it a lot easier for both of you to keep the leash loose. It'll never make it easier to say, but it'll make it easier to do. And again, keeping your anchor hand at your center of gravity can be super helpful.
Cinder, a couple other comments. One, an endorsement for all the topics that you referenced. That's encouraging. And then a specific one about on reactivity on walks as a future topic.
Okay. Yeah.
Let me ask a question since I'm already talking. Is there a point when you use treats a lot in training? I mean, if you're going to routinely be taking your dog on long walks, there does come a point when, just come treat. And for my personal dog, she's extremely food motivated. So if there's any food, she can't focus on anything else. like fixated. So, does one continue? Is there a point when you say, okay, dogs learn what they need to learn, don't need treats? Or if the dog is so distracted by that, do you have any kind of thoughts on, how long do you need to be treating? Is it forever?
Yeah, a couple of things about that. So we do want to treat forever in some circumstances. Much like getting paid, the harder the work is, the more you want to pay for it. So like a lot of dogs, once they know how to sit, once they know how to come, they're like, you don't need to pay me for that. But if you're asking them to come away from a deer, you want to pay for that. Also for her, if she's super fixated on the food, you might try just using, does she eat kibble?
Yeah.
You might just grab part of her breakfast or dinner and use that for her treats. So it's not so exciting that she's just losing her mind and not able to focus on what she's getting paid for. And if she likes
even kibble is considered payment beyond, just blows the mind.
Is she a lab mix?
No, but she was a former street dog. So I think, going for food is what it keeps you alive. It keeps you from starvation. You got to feed yourself. So anyways. Does
she like toys?
Yeah, but not more than chasing a square. I mean, that would not be a distraction on a walk. Okay. I mean, I just because it's amusing. It's to the point where if she thinks she's going to get a treat, we come home from walk, she gets a chewy treat. Mm-hmm. She'll want to go like up one house and go right home because the treat
like
she knows she'll get
for my smash.
So I've had to separate the chewy from the end of the walk because then we just can't get anywhere. So anyways, but I think it's more of an issue, that's kind of extreme. But if you're, basically you're implying you should always have treats with you in case you need to pay. Right. Even for a dog who's kind of doesn't need a treat for every single thing they do.
Yeah. I mean, Patricia McConnell tells a story about one of her dogs. They were out for a walk, one of her border collies, and he saw a deer and took off after the deer, and she called him and he came back and she's digging through her pockets trying to find something to give him, and she ended up giving him a used Kleenex because she didn't have any treats, but he said he was super excited about it, so it was fine. But it's always good to have stuff with you just in case. And of course, as they learn to pay attention, as they learn what the skills are that we're asking them to do, you don't have to pay as frequently. It's just something that you want to maybe do occasionally to reinforce and keep that behavior solid and in hard situations. Excuse me, sir, you may not steal the cheese off the table.
So I have a question if you're ready for the next question. So I have a really smart foster dog, and it's 7 dwarfs. So she's been through the hound training program, like all these things. She is fabulous in the house, and I've gotten her to the point where she listens in the yard. She sits at the gate before, like she does all the prep beautifully. Mm-hmm. But once you're in the neighborhood walking, food is completely irrelevant. I may or may not exist if she sees a rabbit, a bike, and really it's a dog coming towards her. Like we worked through a lot of it, but what do you do when your dog couldn't care less about food anymore now that you're out on a walk? Yeah.
So is it when you're out, or is it when there's a trigger when you're out?
Yeah. So I've had her for like 6 weeks. Before it was, just being out. But now if we walk at times and we don't run into other dogs, we can actually have an enjoyable walk. And that was 6 weeks of hard work. But still, like if there's a dog, and we've got it down to the point where it's a dog coming towards us, there's just very little I can do. And I don't know if it just needs more time or if I'm really like food just doesn't work in those situations at all.
Needs more distance. You want to start with your food intervention, and we can talk about this in reactivity as well. But
that's fine.
Also, feel free to email me and I'll send you some stuff too. But you want to start with your intervention when she's still able to take food and when the other dog is far enough away that she realizes it exists but is not concerned. Because a lot
Right.
once
Yeah,
they feel
but-
that concern, it's all over with the food and all of that, and you have to just do your emergency U-turns and take off and get somewhere else where you can calm down.
So is that like if I even if I start it early, you know, she's still watching, she'll take it at that point, but then she's focused. So should I just U-turn and give up, or?
So does she look, and will she look back at you when you give her a treat?
If I do it early enough, and sometimes like now she'll let me hide her behind a car and take the
Okay,
treat,
great.
but a lot of times she just it's a losing situation. Yeah.
So it's important that you give her something else to do.
Okay.
And it is important that you let her look, because I mean, just like
Right.
anything that you're concerned about, like if somebody's walking behind me, I can guarantee you I am going to turn around and look, and I am not going to be comfortable until I turn around and look. And with them, if there's a dog or something in the environment that's making them a little concerned, it is important that they get to take a chance to look at it. But then you can
Okay.
say, oh, look, and treat. And when she looks at you, you can say, okay, let's go this way. Let's go over here. Let's run away and
Okay.
move her away.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Tammy, I want you to know that I also use cars to try to hide troubling things from my dog when I see a dog that I know she's going to not like. We just
Well,
we
yeah.
just try to position ourselves
Cars
they're
and
not behind
shrubbery are your best friends.
sort of strategic positioning such that she doesn't really know there's a dog, over there.
Well, I
So
mean, she knows, and it's funny because before that would not have worked. So I take it as a success that she now lets me do that, right?
No, that's great. That is really good. You can also, if you want to work on your walking skills and like looking at things and looking back at you, if there's like an office park near you, you can go there in the evening, and I can guarantee you there will be almost no people and probably no dogs. And so you can
Well, that's a great
practice
idea.
skills before you try to use them in real life.
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah, yeah. And I think I'm gonna get a clicker too. That just seems like a great tool.
It's a really nice tool. It's very clear to them, and it doesn't carry any of our emotion. It's just super helpful because, a lot of times you see a dog and you're like, oh, come here. Okay, good dog. Yeah. And they're like, uh-oh, mom's upset. So it's really nice to have some way to let them know they're doing the right thing without any sort of emotional attachment to it.
Great. Do we have other questions from people on the call?
Oh, sorry, Tim. I didn't mean to pull your hair, sir.
Anyone else with a leash walking question? Do you have any opinions, Cinder, on types of leashes? I mean, I have an adopter with a very hard pulling dog, and I had given her some suggestions before she picked the dog up about, freedom, things that I've heard from people at OPH. And obviously nobody's fans of any of the collars that have, like I think prong collars are kind of out as a concept, but are there any things that can help on pulling to either reinforce, or would they mess up the training? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
No, I mean, I am a big fan of the Freedom Harness, especially since it has the 2 points of attachment. So it has a 2-ended leash. I don't know if you've seen it, the leash.
Yeah.
But it clips on the back and at the chest. And any of the harnesses that have a chest attachment are nice, because if your dog does decide they're going to bolt out to the end of the leash, it turns them right around and they're like, oh, wait, you're my date. Sorry. You can get their attention back on you. The Freedom Harness is good because it does give you a lot of, I call it power steering for dogs. So if you're really having a lot of trouble getting them to be with you or to turn or to, move away from something that they're excited about, it's super helpful. I'm trying to think of which other, There are a couple other harnesses that are really great, but I can't think of the names, but I'll pop those up on the Facebook page.
And what about gentle leaders, which I had a dog in the past that hated it, the kind that, you know, I think dogs usually don't like it. It can stop them from pulling, but it may not be doing other things you want to do, like building the relationship. What's your take on that? And Carrie, I do see your raised hand, so you can go next.
They can be really helpful. It's a really excellent tool, but it's very, very important that you desensitize the dog to wearing it in the house before you try doing anything else, and that you don't pull on it because you can injure their neck. So, you know, it needs to be a self-correcting tool. And I do find them super useful when I'm working with aggression cases, and I can put a gentle leader on under a muzzle and then have a second point of attachment on the harness. So you've got 2 leashes to hold on to and prevent yourself from being bitten, which is nice. That's a goal. But yeah, they can be a really great tool. The gentle leader is nice. And what's the one? There's one that connects in the back of the head, which is kind of nice too, because it's easier to manage. It's not like it doesn't get under how when you walk with a gentle leader, it gets under their feet and the leash gets tangled up. Sometimes it's easier with the one that attaches in the back. What do you need, Oscar? Okay, so Carrie.
Yes,
Hi.
Carrie.
Hi. So I have a rescue. I got her in February, and it's my very first dog. So I've been working with her a lot, and she was house trained when I got her, which was great. And she's gotten a lot better on the leash. She's not pulling as much. I use different leashes with her. So I have a jogger leash, which I will try to jog with her. It doesn't always work. But for me, for hands-free, it actually helps a little bit when we walk. They're less stressful on my shoulder. And so I do like the jogger leash, but I also alternate with a regular like 4 or 6 foot leash and sometimes a shorter city leash when I'm practicing with her walking so that she stays close and heals a little bit better. And I do work at a university. So in the evenings, our parking lots are very free of people and things. And so I've also started practicing working with her, doing recall and taking her off the leash, because also there's woods there. So there are deer, turkeys, squirrels, and lots of things. So I'm practicing with her, and I'm just, it's a lot of work, but she's doing really well. And I like using different types of leashes. Do you suggest that type of thing so that it's not the same thing every time and she's not conditioned to one particular way?
Yeah. And I am a huge fan of the hands-free leashes, because I used to put all of my students in a hands-free waist leash when they came, because it just removes that I'm going to drag you where I want you to go.
Right.
And it really helps facilitate learning to reinforce the behavior that you want, to observe the behavior that you want, rather than just dragging everybody everywhere with the leash.
Yeah.
So,
and I think it gives her a sense of not total freedom, but a little loose leash walking where I'm not holding on to her so tightly, like you mentioned, all the time, where she can then feel free to kind of fall back a little bit and walk next to me and know that I'm not going to stop her from doing something. So
when the leash is super tight, the dog doesn't really have to pay attention to you because they know you're there. They can feel it. If the leash is loose, they're a lot more inclined to say, hey, you still back there? Okay. Are we still together? Okay, good.
Right.
So aside from, keeping your rotator cuff from being destroyed, it also really does create that relationship of the dog paying attention as well as you paying attention.
And I do have a second question kind of statement thing. So she's very familiar with our route that we walk in the morning. So I try to switch it up a little bit, but she definitely has her path that she wants to go and the one she does not. And I've read and seen things where they're like, it's your walk, you're the leader, you show them where to walk, lead with your shoulders. And I feel like I don't want to always do that with her. I want her to kind of lead me. We lead each other.
Right.
Right.
I am pretty firmly in the camp of it's their walk. And, there are people who will say never let them sniff, which
Yeah.
is crazy because sniffing is a huge activity for them. It
Mhm.
makes them tired. It gives them tons of information. It's actually more tiring for them than the walking piece. So
Mhm.
it is really important. I mean, one of the things that I mentioned for future topics is sniffy walks and why they're important and why dogs should be allowed to, you know, sniff around and check things out. Now, I
Yeah.
mean, I do competitive obedience with my dogs, and so I don't want them sniffing and wandering away when we're in the ring, but
Mhm.
that's a whole different situation, and they know that. You know, it's like there are cues that tell you what we're doing at whatever time.
Right. And sometimes when they like to sniff a lot, it's when you're in a hurry and have to get on a call for work. And
Yep.
you're like, why today? Do you want to
Yeah.
sniff all this stuff? So
Yep.
thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, the being in a hurry, that can be where the just going to your potty spot and going potty and going right back in can be super helpful.
Right.
Just teaching them that, you know, business first, business before pleasure.
Mhm.
And if it has to be just business and we go back in and I'll walk you later, that's okay too.
Great. Thank you.
Good. Do we have other questions? I don't see anything in the chat. Anyone else want to ask anything of Cinder?
And you can always email me.
Right. Good. Well, we can end up a few minutes early. It's almost 8. Well, of course, since my clocks all say different times, I don't actually know what time it is, but I know it's approaching 8. Cinder will confirm the actual time.
It's like 10 till.
So thank you. This was great. Again, Cinder's, of course, the OPH trainer, and you can always reach her or other training folks through training@ophrescue.org, and our training team will connect you. This is really useful. And it sounds like we have a few other topics teed up for the future. So great. Thank you, Cinder. And everyone have a good evening, and we will see you hopefully on next month's call.
Yep. Thanks, everybody. I guess next month we'll talk about reactivity on walks.
Okay, great. Good night.
That'd be great. Thank you.